Hey there, Radioheads. Welcome to another episode of Radio KBE. I hope you're doing well. As always, if you can like and subscribe or share the videos, it always helps out. So, we have another episode of What Are the Lakers Doing that I wanted to kind of cover in today's episode. And for the backdrop of just kind of this conversation, I thought I'd just pull up the article that was written by Sam Amick and Jovan over at The Athletic about just kind of some of the stuff that they've just been talking about and just some of the stuff that we've been hearing just over the past week or so. And this is being recorded on Monday night. So tomorrow, I believe, or maybe on Wednesday, I forgot what day it is exactly, Rob and Darvin Ham are scheduled to have a press conference, which is supposed to be before, I believe, LeBron's minicamp, which is coming up on like Thursday or something like that of this week in San Diego. But you know, some stuff has happened since we last checked in, and one of the things that's happened since we last checked in was we signed Dennis Schroeder, and that was not like a surprising signing because like Mark Stein had sort of linked Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers for a couple of weeks, couple of months now. But on top of that, it seems as though um, based on what Schroeder was saying in one of the interviews that I think he just did recently with one of his local reporters or local media, is that he had been talking to the Lakers for about like 3 months. Um, so that kind of gave me some pause for a second, and then he just kind of talks about how like LeBron's been the one who's been like recruiting him and stuff like that. So that gave me a little bit of pause because I just sort of thought about that for a second, just because timeline and stuff like that doesn't really make any sense. But before we get into that, the more conspiratorial part, which I enjoy, let's just kind of start reading through some of the stuff that we have here. So, as usual, the articles position this. This is a pretty standard position that I think the writers have taken for quite a while now. That it's not a very enthusiastic opinion of holding on to Russ and having him on the team. I think some writers have very firmly put all of the blame on one player, and the disaster of last season being on one player. And it's fine. Some people feel that's their opinion. There's a lot of fans that feel that way too. I like to call it addition by subtraction. Twitter believes that if you get rid of Russ or you just send him home, the team will automatically be better. I don't necessarily agree with that, but people are allowed to feel that way if they want to. So the article sort of just starts off talking about just kind of this whole last year's failure of the season, and Russ hasn't gotten moved. And then training camp is a week away. Official training camp is about a week away after LeBron's mini camp that he's going to have, and Russ hasn't been traded. And look, Russ could get traded at any moment. It's just a matter of what the conversations are going on, what's the holdup, that sort of stuff. But since then, we've traded away Taylor Horton Tucker. We've signed a bunch of guys. We've gotten younger. We've gotten faster. We've gotten more athletic. And then the most notable trade that we've made so far is trading Taylor for Pat Beverly, which was a big thing in itself because of the history between Russ and Pat. But you guys remember the last video I said Russ is a pro. He's not going to rock the boat and jeopardize like just who he is as a person over something that's happened in the past. So he's going to be a pro whether he actually made up with Pat Beverly or not. Like Bev has been actually pretty supportive of him since getting here, but that makes sense because he's sort of a journeyman, and he's always kind of done good PR everywhere he's gone and stuff like that. So if we keep reading, you can see the positioning of just kind of this whole situation is that Lakers signed Dennis, and now you have Dennis, Westbrook, and Pat on the team. And when Pat got signed, there was a lot of conversation, not only from Coach Ham, but just sources within the Lakers that they'd be okay with playing Pat and Russ together. And situationally, that's possible. Like, I wouldn't do that as part of your core rotation, but I understand what they're trying to do, what they're trying to tell us. I don't necessarily agree with it, but they're basically saying that Pat can essentially play Caruso's role And Caruso, it's not like he was a spectacular shooter or a spectacular offensive player, but he was a very, very good defensive player. And so they're probably thinking that Pat can play that role, except he's a better shooter. He's a better floor spacer than Caruso was when he was with us. He's improved since then. But just looking at this sort of thing, like if when we got Pat, the idea was that you'd be able to play, at least the idea that was presented to us is that you could play them together. The way that the Schroeder signing is being positioned is a little more combative and less collaborative. And so as we keep reading and stuff like that, you'll notice that like one of the things, and this is I think a position that some people have been taking, which the coach has not been taking, right? But I've only seen it come from one source. Only one place, one publication has been pushing the idea that, Russ could get sent home or Russ would come off the bench, like he would get benched no matter what he did, and he would be forced to come off the bench and he has to do what they say. And it's very combative sort of language about just kind of what it is. And so now that Pat is here and Dennis Schroeder's here, now the position the position that's being proposed now, at least in this article, is what I highlighted here. Like at a minimum, it seems clear Westbrook will have to outplay new addition Patrick Beverley and Schroeder if he's going to retain his starting role. So regardless of who's writing it, regardless of where the information's coming from, like that part I'm not sure about. Like this idea, like there's been like this strange idea, or there's been like this sentiment that's been pushed across that punishing Russ is the only way the Lakers can get better. Like disciplining Russ is the only way the Lakers can get better. And so like I just keep thinking about it, and it's a bizarre stance, because the way I see it, if Russ wins training camp, let's just say we go along with this idea that like Russ now has competition in the locker room and he has to play for his spot. What happens when Russ wins the training camp battle? And what if Russ is just Russ? He doesn't change anything about the way that he plays. He's just better than Dennis and he's better than Pat. Then what happens? Like what do the Lakers do? Like what position can you take to say something like that? Or what position can you take to try and make him look worse? So you're basically trying to, the way it reads to me sometimes when I read stuff like this is, and again, this is not, people write how they want to write. Everybody has a job to do. It's totally fine. But like the thing that like, when I read stuff like that, it's almost as if you're trying to find a way to punish the player. And every time I read stuff like this, like I think back to what Ramona Shelburne wrote like back in April, like before the season was even over, when I read about, when she wrote about people in the front office thinking that the only way Westbrook would change or Russ would change is if he was humiliated publicly. And I don't know why, but that sentence always sits in my mind, because I'm just like, who thinks that way? Like who in their mind goes out of their way to think that, the only way I can get this player to do what I want is to degrade the player. And that's the part that I don't like. And then, frankly, to be honest, that's the reason why the Lakers are in the situation they're in right now. Because there was just so much unnecessary stuff that you basically allowed now you're basically allowing other teams to be able to say, well, you don't want him. You hate him. And those teams, if he's not a buyout candidate, I assure you, there's probably a team that's already got their taxpayer MLE ready, the $6 million or whatever it is, to sign Russ. Like, I don't think he's, like, a lot of people have speculated that, like, oh yeah, he's going to be out the league, he's going to get barely available. I don't think he is. I think a team, and I don't think it's going to be a bad team. I think there are some contenders out there that could probably give him 24 minutes, 28 minutes potentially for him to play. Will they be like willing to bench him? For sure, but I don't think he had like the market for Russ is like he's going to be out the league. And I think just that it's just there's so many extremes. And then again to have this idea that like, oh, we're signing guys just so we can challenge him in training camp, that doesn't seem like a very smart way of building a roster out. It just doesn't make it's almost the opposite. It's more like you're hyper focused on one player and just trying to be combative as possible. So I'm not sure if the Lakers have that same mindset and stuff like that, but stuff like that's going to be written and whatnot. But we signed Dennis Schroeder. So what's the actual way that we're probably going to use him? I think most likely what's going to happen is if Russ is still on this roster by opening night, which he very well may be, I think Dennis is probably going to end up being the backup, and I think he's going to be okay with that. I don't think, unlike the first time around where he wanted the starting position, I think he's probably had a dose of humility come around because since the Lakers, he's gone to Boston for the MLE, and Boston didn't even keep him the entire season. They traded him. I think at the midseason mark or something like that, and then he signed sort of a random deal with Houston, and then they didn't want to bring him back either, or they didn't bring him back either because they're going with their youth movement. So he's in a matter of 2 years had quite a downward spiral in terms of his financial earnings and what it was he could have potentially had and stuff like that. So signing Dennis, I think is if Russ does get traded, it's probably going to be Pat that slots into the starting point guard spot. Dennis will be the backup. He's probably better suited for that because he's more of a small shooting guard than he is a traditional point guard. He's not really a playmaker in the traditional sense. He doesn't do things on the court to try and create shots for his teammates. He looks mainly to score himself or draw shooting fouls, which he's good at times and whatnot. And he's a good defender and stuff like that. So I think I think that signing him makes sense if you're moving Russ. But at this point, the Lakers have too many small guys, right? You have Pat, who's 6'1", Dennis, who's 6'1", Kendrick Nunn, who's 6'2", and then you have Russ, who's 6'3", and then Lonnie is 6'4". So let's say Lonnie is he's a little bit more, because I believe KCP was 6'4" also, and we used to start him. So Lonnie's more shooting guard size. Austin Reeves is more shooting guard size. I also read somewhere, I think Mark Stein wrote it, where there's something to the degree of Austin Reeves can be a 3. He can't be a 3. He, not that he can't be, if the opposing team downsizes, then maybe he can play 3, but he really shouldn't be playing the 3. If LeBron is your 3, there's a huge physicality drop off from LeBron to Austin Reeves if you're doing 3. Remember when the Lakers were a competitive roster, a championship roster those 2 years, Kuzma was the backup 3. He was the backup 4 and the backup 3, and he's not 6'5". He's much taller. He's much heavier. Lonnie is actually very close in size and weight that KCP was. We were running Avery Bradley, who's 6'3", right? So just an inch shorter than Lonnie. But Avery Bradley's 180 pounds. Lonnie's about 200 pounds. So the weight difference made a difference. So teams would get the switch on Avery, and then they could bully him with size. It's not that he wasn't a good. He was a terrible defender. He's a good defender. He has some technical skills, defensive technical skills that are really good, but he was small. So when you paired him next to Russ, it doesn't work. And that's essentially what the Lakers are talking about doing with Russ and Pat. And I've also seen this idea where Dennis and Pat can play together. And, if the opposing team has 2 guards in the backcourt that are small or that are not offensively skilled, then for sure maybe you could do it. If there's just 3-and-D type of guys, maybe, yeah, sure, you can get away with that. But this idea that you could just play Dennis and Pat, you could play 2 6'1" guys, and that your defense won't be compromised, I don't think that's accurate, and I don't think that's a very smart way of going about doing it. Could they do it situationally at times? For sure. But I don't think that's a very good idea. You have to have some sort of size in the backcourt when you're on the floor, because even if you're really good at cutting off angles, a guy like Pat, a guy like Dennis, they're good at stuff like that. Even if you're good at cutting off angles, you still lose containment because the guy is 5-6 inches taller than you. It's just a basketball thing. And so people who are suggesting that the Lakers should do that, I don't think that's very smart, and I don't think that's a good idea. But again, situationally it may work, but that's not if you were concerned about losing containment on the perimeter before, or guys just shooting over small guys, that's exactly what's going to happen. If you're suggesting that Pat should be our starting 2. So I think, if we scroll up a little bit and we read about the training camp battles, like you could see some piecemeal stuff that if you take some information from this article and then you read some of the stuff that Mark Stein has been saying, like you can find information, you could sort of piece together some of the information that makes sense. Like if you take a look at it over here, the Athletic reports that the Lakers are expected to have several other battles for starting roles, right? So they're talking about Russ. I don't think that's going to be a battle for in training camp. I think Russ is going to get the starting spot. Um, the one that makes the most sense is here, Lonnie Walker against Austin Reeves. Like I think that will be a real training camp battle, for sure. That one makes the most sense because one is 6'4" and one is 6'5", and they both can play complementary roles, right? Lonnie was, I think last season was somewhere around like a 33% catch and shoot 3-point shooter guy. The year before that, he was like 38%. So if you look at his overall 3-point percentage, it's much lower because his pull up 3-point percentages were really, really bad. But he can be like at least a league average catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and then occasionally he probably has some games or stretches where he gets hot. Same thing with Austin Reeves. And so it makes more sense for one of those two guys to be starting because they're more of a complementary role. Then it's just a matter of who's the guy that's starting, right? If it's Russ starting, do you have Russ and Austin Reeves, or do you have Russ and Lonnie? Because now you have a 6'3" guy, 6'4" guy, or a 6'3" guy, 6'5" guy. That makes more sense. If Russ gets traded for wings or something like that, then it makes more sense because now you have Pat or Dennis, who are really good defensive players. Dennis is a little bit more of a downhill guy. Makes more sense to put like Pat and like Lonnie together and start those two together, and then have Dennis and Austin come off the bench together. Like because there's complementary skills, right? Lonnie's a downhill attacker. Like he's got the athleticism to do that. He just gets casted in roles where he's a 3-and-D guy, which he can do at an average level at least. Whereas Pat is much more better defensively, and he's more of a traditional 3-and-D player. So pairing Lonnie and Pat together makes sense. Dennis is a downhill guy. Austin Reeves is not as much of a downhill guy. He's more of a complementary player, though he does have some skills in that regards. I could also see lineups where Austin's playing the point guard and Lonnie is the off guard, right? And then you have a 6'4" guy, 6'5" guy. Then you have LeBron, AD, and whoever you decide to play. So there's a lot of different combinations you can go with. But you have to pair it based on skill and based on like just kind of what you're trying to accomplish from those specific players. So like those sort of things make sense, and like those sort of training camp battles and all that sort of stuff, like it makes a ton of sense. But this idea that starting 2-6-1 guys is a smart thing is not. And the other thing being that Dennis is going to be a threat to Russ's job. I don't think that they know each other. Like that's the other thing that's kind of crazy. Like Dennis knows, like they played together, I believe, and Dennis knows Russ, and Russ knows Dennis. And to my knowledge, it's not like they have a bad relationship, or they have some bad history like Pat and Russ do. So it's just, again, like if Russ beats them out, like if we want to entertain this idea that Russ's job security is on the line, like I don't think Dennis is signing a veteran minimum contract for a second chance with the Lakers, and the first thing that he wants to do is cause friction with the guy that's, probably going to be the starting point guard for the Lakers if he doesn't get traded. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem smart. And I think if there are people in the Lakers front office that are hoping something like that can happen, I don't think they have the team's best interest at heart then, honestly. For me, it sounds to me like whoever that person is just wants to get their pound of flesh from this whole situation for last season with what happened with Russ, and I don't think that's very smart. But Dennis is our 14th signing. And so we don't really have, we can waive Wenyen if we really had to create an extra roster spot. The Lakers typically don't do anything with that 15th roster spot. A lot of teams, they leave that 15th roster spot open. So then that way they can, sign somebody during the buyout. They don't have to waive any guaranteed money and stuff like that. The Lakers may sign a 15th player because Wenyen is a non-guaranteed contract. So they could always waive him at any point and create an extra roster spot. So they may end up using that 15th roster spot on somebody. But I think the general idea people have thought is that, if Russ gets moved, the Lakers can do a lopsided deal. They can bring back two players and trade out one player, or bring back three players if another player like Kendrick Nunn goes out and stuff like that. So we haven't really heard much. A lot of conflicting information about like what the depth chart is going to look like, and then you get stuff like this about what the if there's going to be a training camp battle or something like that. So there really hasn't been that much that's going on. It's going to be very interesting to see just kind of what Rob and Coach Ham have to say in regards to just kind of what's going on. But overall, this roster lacks size and shooting, and as of right now, the largest concern I have is if AD gets hurt or if LeBron gets hurt, what is our backfill for those roles? What is our backfill for a situation like that? Because that's basically what we went through last season. The seasons where we were competent and we were good, the reason why we were effective as a team was when AD went down, Kuzma could step in. Or when LeBron went down, Kuzma could step in. Kuzma was a very capable role player. We don't have that for either of those guys. Troy Brown can't fill that role. Austin Reeves is not a 3 or a 4, so he can't fill that role either. And Juan Toscano-Anderson can't fill that role either. They're great players. They're wonderful people. But that it's not reasonable to expect that either one of those guys to be able to backfill. And last season is no different from this season. Like, if AD goes down, I would not magically expect Russ to be able to pick up the scoring and defensive load. Same thing for LeBron. Like, if Russ is on this team and his responsibility is to create scoring opportunities for his teammates, he can do that. Like, he can put pressure on the rim, but he can't do the scoring for them. Like, he can't replace a 6'10 player or a 6'8 greatest player of all time in LeBron. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. So, in my mind, that's still a concern. If the Lakers end up addressing their shooting and they get more volume shooting, and it probably will involve having to trade Russ for them to do it, then I have more confidence in the team. But as of right now, I mean, if Anthony Davis and LeBron are healthy, I would think they're probably going to be a non-play-in team. So I think they'll be like a top 6 seed in the West, just off the virtue of our two best players being healthy, because I think they are that impactful. I think Darvin Ham's coaching style, I think Darvin Ham's philosophy and minutes restrictions and just the stuff that he emphasizes, I think that will resonate much more with the players in a way that it probably did with Frank Vogel and the guys last season. And it's those sort of things can be the difference between losing 5 to 6 games or 5 to 8 games and winning 5 to 8 games, which can be the difference between being a 6 seed and being a 2 seed, depending on how tight the race is in the Western Conference. So it'll be interesting to see how things go, but I don't see, like, that still is just something that has to be addressed. The Lakers really have to try and add more wings, not more wings, but like maybe 1 or 2 shooting, wings that can sort of score. If Lonnie and Austin are going to be your 2s, and you're going to have a rotation of like Russ, Dennis, Pat, and Kendrick Nunn, which again, it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, if the Athletic is telling you that there's going to be a training camp battle for Austin Reeves and Lonnie Walker, where does Kendrick Nunn fit into all of this? So that's what I mean. Like, those sort of things, there's still a little unresolved that I'm hoping that the Lakers can resolve and find wings that can help them out. But this is just sort of the situation that they're in right now. But that's really all I wanted to talk about. It seems as though everything that the Lakers do always has like this tinge of like, well, what does this mean for Russ? What does this mean for us? Which rightfully so. He's the biggest salary, and a lot of people don't want him on the team. But it's very hard to come to any sort of conclusion until an actual deal is made. And so, I suspect that the coach is going to continue talking up Russ, and the coach is going to continue talking up everything that's effective. If Dennis does a player interview with the media, I'm sure he's also going to be very enthusiastic and collaborative and positive about like making things work with whoever's on the floor, and just working together and trying to win games, because that's what basketball players do. That's what they want to do. They just want to win games. Like that's all they're going to be focused on. So I'll be interested to see just sort of what happens with the team and what the messaging ends up being. Maybe I'll record another episode if anything interesting comes out of the conversation between or the media day for Rob and Coach Ham. But we're still waiting, just waiting and seeing what happens with this team, and just kind of if they can find the wings that they need to make improvements and stuff like that. And, it's the same stalemate. I think that's what's happening with the Lakers right now. They're in a situation where teams are trying to get that first rounder out of them, and they really don't want to give that first rounder up because they're not getting the value back that they want. But the reason why teams can take that position is because you spent the entire season denigrating one player. Like, that's what happens. So now you're making it very easy for other teams to just be like, yeah, you really don't want this guy. You hated this guy. Like, you wanted to send him home. You wanted him punished. You wanted this. You wanted that. And you're still doing it. So why? You have to give us a first in order for us to take him. And so that's just a situation that the Lakers have to deal with. It's something that they have to wait out until the team actually wants to make a deal, or they have to figure it out, or they have to bite the bullet and figure out what direction they're going to go in and see what sort of draft compensation they have to give up. So I'll be interested to see how things go and just what sort of news come out. But as always, if you can if you can subscribe, it helps out a lot. A simple like does a lot for the videos, because when you do that, it gets shared next to other people on YouTube who watch Laker videos, and then I pop up on there and they get to hear me talk the same way you guys do. But as always, I appreciate all the support. The channel continues to grow. The community of Radioheads continues to grow. And it's really, really awesome, because it's much more fun doing this than arguing with people on social media, like on Twitter or something like that. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful day when you see it, or you have a wonderful evening. And, I'll see you guys in the next video. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Bye.